Here we go. Your St. Louis Cardinals are in first place, I guess. After an impressive run post All-Star break, the Cards stumble into the off day on Monday. But some of the numbers are pretty interesting when you take a closer look. So let's dig in. All right. Since the All-Star break, the Cards have played 17 games, and in that stretch, they've gone 12-5. Now, before these last two losses, that 12-3 record looked really good. It does not look quite as good at 12-5. But in those 17 games, let's take a look at the runs allowed. This is across the board by all the pitchers. They allowed 4, 2, 2, 0, 3, 5, 4, 11, 3, bear with me here, 1, 5, 3, 8, 3, 3, 8, and 6. So to recap there's 6 games that by my count would qualify as allowing too many runs, and basically 5 or more is what I consider to be too many. A quality start would be 3 runs allowed over 6 innings, but I'm allowing or conceding that 4 runs is still an acceptable amount of runs to give up. So 5 or more would be concerning in my opinion. So there were 6 games in that 17-game stretch where they allowed 5 runs or more. The first one, 5 runs, actually was a win. The next one, 11 runs, was also a win. That was the crazy comeback in the Adam Wainwright start. The next one, 5 runs, also a win. The next one, 8 runs, also a win. So in these 4 games that I considered to be concerning as far as the number of runs allowed, they are all wins. Now the next 2, which are the last 2 games against the Houston Astros, 8 runs allowed, a loss. 6 runs allowed, another loss. So still 4 out of those 6 games that were concerning to me as far as runs ended up being wins. Now that tells you that the offense has come alive, and even though we gave up a lot of runs in these starts, the offense, came through and pulled us out of it. So that's something we have not been seeing for a couple months now, but hopefully continues on. So, all right, in those games where too many runs were being allowed, let's take a look at who the pitchers were, particularly the starters, but we'll take another look at some of the other pitchers that came in. All right, so in that first start that was concerning, 5 runs, Daniel Ponce de Leon gave up 4 runs, all earned. In the next one, that was Waino's debacle, where he gave up 7 runs, all earned. Then Ponce de Leon again, but this was sort of a team effort. He only allowed 1 run. Waka then came in and gave up 1 run. Shreve gave up 2 runs and actually got the win. And then Carlos Martinez came in and gave up another run. So really not a lot of runs by any one of them, but it still added up to 5 and made the list and was a win. The next one out was Adam Wainwright again, 4 runs. Now he only gave up 4, which didn't qualify for the list, but total in that game, they gave up 5 or more. And then Ponce de Leon again, 5 runs, all earned. Now that was the Saturday game against Houston. And if you recall, he was taken out with the bases loaded, and Michael Wacha came in and gave up a grand slam. Now, those runs were charged to Ponce de Leon, except for the batter who Wacha faced, but still, concerning nonetheless that those runners were left out there. But it's hard to say that that's all Daniel's fault. You kind of want to put some of the blame on the pitcher that gave up the grand slam. And then in Sunday's start, Dakota Hudson gave up 5 runs, all earned. So now we look at that again. We've got Ponce de Leon, Wainwright, Ponce de Leon, Wainwright, Ponce de Leon, Hudson, as far as the starts. Now, one of those, that's 3 by Daniel Ponce de Leon. One of those, he only gave up 1 run, but he got switched out in, I think, the 3rd inning, maybe. So, anyway, the trend there would be those 2 guys, Daniel and Adam. So, I don't know. What do we think of that? Wainwright's last 2 starts are a concern for sure, but I went back, his 8 starts before that were all very good before you got to another start that wasn't good. So 8 in a row of good starts compared to the last 2. It's hard to call that a trend or too big of a concern. But you do have to kind of wonder as we get into the dog days of summer here, as July is wrapping up, that maybe he could be breaking down. He could be wearing down with the summer heat. So, maybe he'll kind of get refreshed. A lot of times these guys will get a second wind, especially as temperatures cool down a little bit. But it's something to keep an eye on. If he has another bad start in a row, then definitely we might want to consider shutting him down for a little bit, maybe giving him a start off. I don't know. But I don't think it's too much to be concerned about yet with Wainwright. Now, Ponce de Leon, that's a little different. His numbers haven't been, the last couple starts, obviously, or the 2 or 3, they haven't been great, but he was so good before that. They put him in the rotation in place of Waka because he had so earned it and grabbed hold of it. So he was very good out of the pen, and he had been good as a starter, but maybe he needs to go back to the pen. It's hard to say for sure. Again, you kind of maybe want to give him one more start to see, but at this point, we can't afford to be giving these guys, too long a leash. They need to make a move or figure something out. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm less concerned about, it's hard to believe I'm saying this, I'm less concerned about Wainwright than Ponce de Leon, and I feel like at this point we don't really have another option. I know they kind of switched back Waka at one point and then put him back in the pen. So I don't know who that choice, maybe you go with John Gant, but I'm not sure he's the guy at this point. I really think it would be someone in AAA getting called up, but we'll see. Goldschmidt has been crazy on fire again, I guess, in a small sample size since July 21st. If you recall, in the last episode, I was pointing out how bad he had been since the All-Star break, but how good he was in July before the All-Star break. So here he is batting good again. So let's take a look at this relatively small sample size since July 21st, which was last week. 29 at-bats, 10 hits, 6 home runs, which we'll talk about, the 13 RBI, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts for a 344 average, 387 on base, 416 slugging, 803 OPS. So pretty darn good numbers. Like we said, during that stretch, he had the 6 consecutive games with a home run, which ties Mark McGwire and Matt Carpenter for the franchise record. Everybody was pulling for him to go for 7 in a row, but it was not to be. He was denied today on Sunday. But still, very cool to see him getting hot and just looking good the whole time doing it. It wasn't even like all he was doing was hitting home runs. He was definitely contributing across the board and playing his usual Gold Glove caliber defense. So good to see him getting going. Now, he slowed down a little bit today with this, where the streak was snapped. He was 1 for 5 with a single. I think he got on base with an error also that put him over at second. So he was actually on base twice, but just the one single. So yeah, hopefully he can stay hot, and I think he will. I mean, we keep saying that all season long. I think he's going to get going, but it really feels like he's kind of getting locked in. And they said he spent some extra time with the hitting coach out on the field as opposed to in the cage. He wanted to see the ball a little differently in his practices, and it paid off. There was a particular spot he had been working on, inside pitches in particular, and he saw pitch after pitch after pitch, practicing that, and then in the game, sure enough, he hit a home run on that inside fastball, turned on it, kept it fair, and he did what he worked on. So hopefully some of this stuff is clicking with this new hitting coach, and we'll see. All right, so how do we feel about first place? I want to say, 2 days ago I was super excited. After this weekend, I'm kind of lukewarm on it. Obviously, it's exciting to be in first place, to have pulled ahead the way they did. They had sole possession for a day. Now they're back tied again with the Cubs. We'll talk about the standings in a minute. But, yeah, I think most people would agree. After that 12-3 record, they were looking tremendous, but losing two in a row to Houston and the way they lost, giving up a lot of runs and not scoring many, is concerning. Are they sliding back into their old offensive funk? But Houston's a great team, right? They're near the top of the league in wins, if not at the top. Um, they've got good pitching, really good hitters, great defense. They're just an all around uh, very high caliber team. So it's not too big of a deal to lose 2 out of 3 to them. But again, it's the way we did it. We just didn't look that great. So, they looked so good on the road. They come home. You hope that they're going to look just as good in front of their home fans, and they kind of didn't. But, the Friday game was obviously very cool to get that win. But yeah. So the question is it legit? Are they really a first place team? A 12-5 record would indicate that they are. You're definitely winning, more than 2 out of 3, which we always said, kind of the Tony La Russa mantra is, if you just win 2 out of 3, you're going to be fine by the end of the year. So, you know, 12-5 is really good. But some of that was against some poor opponents, Pittsburgh and Cincinnati in particular. Now, at the time we started playing them, I'm not sure we were convinced that they were poor opponents. I was concerned that, if things didn't go well, Pittsburgh was going to leapfrog us in the standings, and now they are last place in the division by a lot of games. So, they did what they needed to do against lesser teams, and we'll see how they do coming up. They lost 2 out of 3 against Houston. They're about to play the Cubs this week. So there's going to be an exciting series coming up, and it's going to tell us a lot, I think. Maybe one of the teams is going to win 2 out of 3, and there will only be one game difference in the standings. But if we get a sweep here, we could see a big breakaway. So the Cubs and Brewers have struggled over the last few weeks. Now, they kind of, when the Cardinals were really struggling, so were they, but they kind of picked it up when we did. But we did make up ground, and we took, we surpassed them. So good for us. But I do think they're going to get better here too. So again, the question is it legit? Do they really deserve to be in first place? I would say so, but just barely. This isn't an obvious thing where we go, oh man, look how great they're playing. They look so much better than these other teams, and now we're just going to run away with it. I don't feel that way, but I do think we're, right there with them. Do we project to continue at this pace? As constructed, I would say it doesn't look likely, particularly because of starting pitching. We've seen a couple rough outings in a row from Ponce de Leon. Wainwright's been concerning. Hudson today was not very good. He's had a couple starts now where he didn't look that great, but in the end, he got out of the trouble and ended up, going for a quality start. So, but, he's kind of concerning me too as his innings increase and he gets later into the season. So, that's 3 of our pitchers that we're kind of concerned about. And, I think they could stand to trade for a starting pitcher. Now, some of those guys are already being moved. Some of the names that we've had our eye on as fans that I'm assuming the team has had their eye on too have already been traded. So, the cupboard's going to be getting bare here real quick. I think the trade deadline is Wednesday afternoon or something. So we'll see what they do. And it's the Cardinals. I honestly don't think they're going to do much. They haven't done much at the trade deadline the last few years. But it'd be nice if they did, if they'd go get a quality starter who could at least take some innings off these guys and help out the bullpen. The bullpen's been having to come in so early in so many games that I think that's a problem with the pen too. We could use a bullpen arm, but I think as we get a starter, we'll put one of these guys like Ponce de Leon back in the bullpen and give them some relief there. My first instinct was to say that Waka needs to not pitch anymore. But when I looked at his numbers, they really weren't as bad as you would think. Obviously, the grand slam yesterday was a punch to the gut, but he didn't give up any runs after that, I don't believe. And he had, I think, 5 strikeouts in 4 innings. So all in all, that outing by him wasn't all that bad besides the first batter that he faced. Um, and you go back, and he was really kind of inconsistent. He'd have two decent outings in a row, then a clunker, and then he'd have two decent outings before that, and then a clunker before that. So, is that enough to say he shouldn't get to pitch anymore? Probably not. Should he be a guy that we bring into high pressure situations? Probably not. He probably needs to be that long relief guy with a big lead or a big deficit, or if he just hasn't pitched for a while and then everybody's gassed out there, bring him in until he shows that he's rock solid. But he's been inconsistent enough that it's like you don't really need to count on him. You've got some other guys. So I didn't really like seeing him come in for Ponce de Leon on Saturday, but I get it. It was early enough in the game. You figured you were going to need some innings out of a guy. He's a guy who can give you multiple innings, and they needed that, but they didn't need the grand slam. So the only other point to kind of consider is when and if Ozuna is healthy. I know he's been exercising his hand, and supposedly he's going to come back soon, but who knows with fingers and hand issues like that, how much strength that's going to sap. And as good as he was hitting before, you'd hate to just force him back into the lineup and have him, not be 100%. So, but if he's healthy, if he's ready, I think Bader should go down to Memphis. As much as they've tried to prop him up as the face of the franchise, as good of a player as I think he can be, he's just not hitting enough to be on the roster, on the 25-man roster. Definitely not in the lineup every day. As good as he is on defense, and I think he would have made that catch that Munoz didn't catch at the center field wall the other night where he slammed into the wall. Bader would have caught it, but, he's just not hitting enough. You can't keep him in the lineup. So he needs to go down to Memphis, play every day, get some at-bats, work on some things with less pressure, figure it out, and then, if he does, he can come back. But I think when Ozuna comes back, O'Neill will stay, Edmonds should stay, and Bader should go down. But we'll see. All right, so that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on, was just kind of like get our feelings on first place, right? It's super exciting to be there. So glad finally they made it back to what we all expected, a first place team. But it's a little nerve-wracking, right? I mean, it's going to be a tight race at that top of the division. And, they kind of showed with this series against Houston that maybe they're not quite ready yet to go against the top, elite teams. But we'll see. They're getting there. The pitching's been better than I would have thought when I went and looked back, especially at some of those outings, that we really only had a few of these kind of really high run totals, and most of those ended up being wins anyway. So if the offense can stay hot and make up for some of these pitching woes, then I think they're going to be all right. Okay, let's look at the standings. So as you all know, I think the Cardinals and the Cubs are tied for first place with a 56-49 record. The Brewers are one game back with a 56-51 record. So we've got a couple games in hand on them, which is nice. The Reds are in fourth place, 48-55. That puts them 7 games back. They leapfrogged Pittsburgh over the weekend. And the Pirates have just been struggling. They are 46-59, 10 games back now. If you recall, it wasn't very long ago, I was worried about the Pirates passing the Cardinals in the division, and they are now 10 back. So, I wouldn't say it's over yet for them, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Pirates and Reds start mailing it in and trading and preparing for next year. We'll see. If they don't, good for them. I'm not saying they should tank. I just wouldn't be surprised if they do. So, all right. Well, that's all I've got. I appreciate you listening. I'd like to hear from you. Give me your thoughts on what you think of first place. Do they deserve to be there? Are they going to continue to be there? What moves should they make to bolster the lineup, bolster the rotation and the bullpen? If any, should they stand pat with what they got? So, all right. Well, like I said, thanks again for listening. Until next time, I'm Jared, and this is the BFIBs Almanac.